Hi, my name is Ben and welcome to Field and Foley. Today I'm excited to welcome Mattia Cellotto, a passionate field recordist and sound designer whose love for audio starts at the source, recording. With over 10 years of experience creating highly respected sound libraries, Mattia has built a reputation for deeply understanding the raw materials of sound and transforming them into powerful creative tools. His latest release, Animal Hyperrealism Volume 4, continues a celebrated series capturing many ultra-detailed animal vocalizations recorded at 192 kHz, perfect for creative sound work. Alongside his library work, he's contributed sound design to major titles like Battlefield 5 and Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, as well as commercials for brands like Google and Nickelodeon. So, hi, Mattia, and thank you for being on the show.
Hi. Well, that was quite the flattering introduction. Thank you for
I'll
that.
try my best to compile all the info, and most of the time I'm like, holy hell, he worked on that, and they worked on this, and so, well deserved.
Thank you.
So, my first question would be, because we are leaning into the sound libraries now, what made you want to create sound libraries in the first place?
Okay, good question. I think it was about like 10 years ago. I just finished a year at Vancouver Film School studying sound design for visual media, and moved back to my home country, to Italy, to regroup with my partner and determine what to do next. And to make a long story short, we moved to Scotland in Dundee. And after some applications to game studios, it didn't seem like I had something setting me apart, if that makes sense, something that I could consider a strength. And in between that and having quite a good chunk of free time, I thought that it'd be cool to start recording some libraries, also because I didn't own that many, since I was sort of like on a student budget, since I was looking for a job. So we went to this place because it would be cheap to live there, and potentially, you'd have some room for developing on the kind of more, artistic side, rather than having to immediately take on a job to provide for the month, so to speak. So that's what I did. I did a little bit of boom operator work, a little bit of commercials work, but in the meantime I was working also on applications and libraries. So at some point, recording sounds for applications to game studios started to kind of go hand in hand, and I think that's when I started to create libraries with the purpose of actually selling them. And the first one was just recorded with not much at all. It was called the Borax Experiment, and it was pretty much just a collection of sounds that were kind of slimy and gory, made with this borax compound, which is like gluish, and you can just kind of play with it. And I found it interesting because it's kind of a good replacement for meat impacts, but it doesn't allow any, or better, it doesn't involve any waste of food. So I found it fun, and I really enjoyed the process in itself. And I think from there on, it just became a little bit of an addiction, a little bit of something that helps me understand the very fundamentals of a sound that maybe I'm trying to ultimately design. Like especially with Cataclysm for explosions, I thought, I know how to make an explosion when I have all of the material that is already cleaned up for me by amazing recordists, editors, and mixers. But how would I go about making my own? Do I really understand what it means? I think that's one of the things that keeps me interested in it. I think the idea of learning from recording is what keeps me in it. And at the beginning, it was more of a perhaps necessity, just to kind of, find something to do and set myself apart.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. I used to also try to get some impact sounds and didn't have money for libraries to just spend here and there, and I like used wet rags and stuff like that and wrapped stuff and had these impacts and yeah, also of course the classical bell pepper crunch. But yeah, afterwards it all went into a stew, so no waste there. I can really relate to like just yeah, not wasting something for sound design. It's not something that I want to do as well. And yeah, what I want to talk about as well, because I mentioned it in the introduction, you're recording especially your animal sounds with 192 kilohertz. And maybe for beginners that are listening to the podcast that are maybe asking themselves, like, okay, why, what use case would you have for recording that high quality? Yeah, just maybe you can explain it for people that aren't aware of that.
Of course, I'll explain it for animals, but of course the same concept can apply to sound design in a more generic sense and recording in a more generic sense. But for animals, you have, if we start from the strict necessity of recording ultrasonic sound, you could think of bats. Bats simply don't make a sound that propagates into the hearable range for us, at least most of them or some types. So recording with ultrasonic microphones means that then we can slow things down in post-production, just like with a high-speed camera. You can create smooth motion because you have 200 frames per second and whatnot, or 240. And here it's pretty much the same situation, only instead of having a fluid motion, you retain high-frequency detail. So if you are thinking of bats as, animals that have an extension over 100 kilohertz, then it becomes a little bit easier to think that not just bats have that extension. They are kind of known to have that extension because their lowest frequency is already ultrasonic. But if we think about the sibilant of a human being, meaning like or sounds that are a little bit more sharp, even that we produce, they go into the ultrasonic domain, and they might hit 70, maybe even 100 kilohertz, depending on how closely recorded they are. And so in this case, when we start to look at animals in general, each animal will have characteristics of their sound that may propagate in the ultrasonic domain. And most importantly, some animals will modulate their voice so quickly that in real time for us, it's impossible to catch the detail that the animals are capable of creating in their vocal performances. So especially for birds, this is true, where a simple tweet that is a high frequency kind of tinny sound that, even like the next door kind of bird that we may have in the European landscape, so to speak, that you might not think twice about when you hear it in the morning. If you are able to record it close enough, you might realize that something that feels like a shrill, very, 0.5 seconds long sound has a whole language to it that sets apart each vocalization from the next. So even though you might hear these thrills and think it's almost like a synthesizer where you press the same button and you press it for different lengths, but the sound is almost pretty much the same. When you slow things down, you realize that it really isn't. So that's the interesting thing about ultrasonic sound recording. And of course, this goes hand in hand with big movie productions or just any kind of production where there's a large creature or some particular entity that needs to sound kind of realistic but not quite realistic and larger than life. Then you can really lean into 192 kilohertz recording or just ultrasonic recording in general to slow things down and remove them from their original bodies, so to speak, and then put them into something new. Of course, this also enables you to tone match animals that wouldn't necessarily be compatible with each other and, layer them with one another and do a lot of juxtaposition, I guess. Is that the right way of saying it? So that you can kind of hide the content, the source, constantly, right? So we've all heard pigs layered in vocalizations at the point that we're almost able to spot them. But when you start to really pitch things in a weird domain, then it's when even a sound designer would not be able to swear that they're hearing that one animal that you are doing things right, at least from my standpoint, when you're really kind of not sure what the sound is, but you are very clear on the emotional intent and the actual feeling that the sound evokes. So yeah, that's what I kind of really like about ultrasonic sound recording.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the same. When the first time I heard this phenomenon of like having this really short, just a peep, just a tweet, and then slow down, and there's a whole melody in there. It really blew my mind. It was like, holy hell! It's like, because that means also that they are able to modulate their voices so fast. That means they must process that information so fast, which, yeah, it all led me into like a spiral of thoughts to really think about animals in a different way. And it was really, really fun to go down into that rabbit hole. And yeah, then also going from that question, what then led you to start the animal hyperrealism series? Because I would say that's your most popular sound library series, and everyone pretty much knows it. And if not, you should check it out. It's amazing material to work with, and yeah, it's a lot of work. Yeah, we will link the documentation about the newest one in the show notes as well. But yeah, when did you decide, like, did you record something and then realize that there was potential in there and then just go all in, or was it a specific project, or what was your thought process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not even sure I know the answer, to be honest, at this point. I know that I was back in the UK. After being in India, I moved to the south of London, and I think around that time I was in Guildford, and there were a couple of zoos and bird centers around there. And I guess I had quite a bit of spare time since my partner remained in Dundee, and the weekends were pretty empty sometimes. So I started to go to zoos just to see what I could record. And back then, of course, I didn't even know that this would necessarily lead to a commercial project. So getting somewhere or investing a day in it was a little bit easier, because you just show up, and if you made a past entry, then you were good, and you didn't really know what you were gonna get. So it may have been around the time that I bought the Sankensio 100 or slightly after, where I thought, okay, a lot of stuff sounds cool, dangling keys and flushing the toilet, whatnot, sure, but what sounds really interesting is human speech, right? And even then, I think libraries already were pretty saturated with human speech made into creature sounds, because it was a novelty to kind of hear voice, like our voice shifted into that domain. So the next natural thing that came to mind to me was, okay, well, if we manage to get close enough to an animal and record it with the ultrasonic microphone, with a stereo image, and ideally as close as possible, then potentially we can get something that is really interesting and could be used beyond creature sound design. And I say that because of all the projects that I've worked on so far, I've had a little chance to do creature sound design, so I'm confident that I didn't do this for work. So it was just a curiosity, I think, and knowing myself, I must have flirted with the idea in a safe space and thought, yeah, I'll just go to one zoo or maybe like a couple and whatnot. And then I must have immediately gotten locked in and thought, okay, now I have like 7 audio files, and I don't know how many I want, but I definitely want more. And like before you know it, you're just approaching this as at least for me, I tend to immediately shift into the, okay, let's do this, let's get deep, and let's try to understand how to make this work at scale and whatnot. So kind of got lost in it, and after quite a few trips, I managed to wrap up the first library. But yeah, I gotta say that snowballed very quickly from being a rough idea to something that I actually wanted to pursue.
Yeah, that's great. I keep thinking about, you mentioned bats in the beginning, and I keep thinking about this memory of my childhood when I was, I think, 9 years old, maybe 8 years old. And we found a bat, my mother and I think it had a broken wing or something, and we could hear it screech. Which was weird because I always thought you couldn't hear them. But I guess because it was like hurt and it was lying in the sun, we brought it to the vet to get fixed up. But I keep remembering that was probably the first time I like did sound design, because I kept constantly trying to emulate that shriek, and at some point I could get it right, right until puberty hit, and then the high voice was gone, so I can't do it anymore. But yeah, so what my question would be is, it's very challenging and unpredictable recording animals, right? Because they don't normally make sounds, or like oftentimes they don't make sounds because they don't want to alert predators, or they don't have a reason to. Yeah. So what is one of the toughest sessions you had where you had like, okay, I want to have this animal, I know it makes a cool sound, but I just like I can't get it to make that sound, or I mean you don't get it to make that sound, but you're not there at the right moment, or I don't know, something happens.
Yeah, this is one of those things where at the beginning it was a lot easier to kind of not dwell on this type of scenario, because you just go to a zoo and you know that the grand total of animals you've ever recorded before is 0. So anything you do manage to record will be worth going in the library. But the more I worked with animal recording, the more I started to get duplicates. And although every animal sounds slightly different, I don't really like the idea of packing an entire, maybe like volume for whatever with the lion recordings, no matter how close up they are, because I already have gone over the theme, if that makes sense. So I've gotten a lot of that. So I've started to have a bit of a dream list of animals that I would love to record. And when one is an animal that I really, really would absolutely love to record because of how I know it can sound, then in my head, I'm already going to the recording session with the cover of the library, in my mind, which is quite hurtful when things don't pan out the way that you'd hope. But this has happened already maybe like 3 times for rhino recordings. In fact, just recently, I think George Vlad posted a few videos, I think a couple of videos of a trip that he had in Africa where he recorded rhinos. And that's exactly the type of sound that I would hope to record close up. But especially with one of the 2 that he posted, these are not sounds that can be recorded in a scenario like a zoo that easily, because any interference whatsoever seems to be quite evident to rhinos. Like, no matter how subtle you try to be, I've worked with a number of animals, and with some you could ship the blimp ahead of time, as I did with rhinos. And for example, when I did that with lions, it really helped for the lion to be at ease with the object. And then we just hoped that they would also be at ease with the person attached to the microphone, aka me. So in the case of rhinos, I've tried drop rigs. I've tried to just have the microphone in my hand. I've tried to, like I said, send the blimp beforehand. But there's always some element where I can really see that I am a distraction. And differently from other animals, where maybe after 1 or 2 hours they will just say, okay, whatever, I don't care that much because you've been here for so long, and I can only worry for so long, and maybe you're a trainee or whatnot. With rhinos, at least in my experience from having been to 3 different places, they will not let go of that feeling of either curiosity, insecurity, or diffidence. So it's been super hard to record in that condition. The hardest condition you can ever get is a condition where you know that the animal is capable of making a sound and the sound simply doesn't happen. And also, rhino enclosures tend to be quite cement based and fairly large and not super acoustically treated, in the sense that, sometimes you get a situation where even though there's no acoustic treatment, you still get decent acoustics because of maybe the presence of hay and whatnot in a farm. But in this situation, it's pretty much just like a empty kind of hospital type of area, where that already means that doing a drop rig, you're kind of taking your chances because they can turn as they please, and you sort of want to be on axis for the purpose of what we talked about with ultrasonic sound. So yeah, all of these things stacked together means that it's really, really hard to get a decent sound in these enclosures. And of course, if you go outdoors, then how would you manage keeping the animal to, what probably would be a fixed position and not exactly fixed in the sense that they can't turn, but like high chance of the vocalization happening at that location with the microphone being kind of, in the right position and all. So there's just so much that is hard to control. So that's got to be the hardest thing that I've tried to record so far and haven't managed to record. I have some nice kind of success stories of things that, didn't seem to work so well and then they worked out. But this one, when you asked me about which one has been the hardest one, I would say this current endeavor that I'm not really sure will be resolved in the next 10 years,
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that would also have been a question if you have a sound that you're still dreaming of. And as we have now ticked this off, maybe, let's go to the story, the success story. What was something that you thought was very hard and then it just happened, or that you just mentioned?
Yes, on the last library that I worked on, I really wanted to try and record an African crane. And that's just because they sound very, very interesting. They have this kind of alarming type of sound to them that is almost like the one of a peacock, but to me at least a lot more interesting. So I've reached out to someone that had trained one to sort of perform on not quite command, but in a way that felt quite reliable. But then it sounded like it would have been very tricky. I would have had to take a plane just to record this one animal. And, we were talking already about thousands of euros just to have the chance of doing it. And I thought, okay, like in the quantity of animals that I'd love to record, I tend to generally go for quantity over, being hard-headed about one animal because I know of, the chance of failure. So if anything, I'll take my chances in a place that has 100 animals in conditions that are not ideal versus one animal that is in perfect conditions, unless that animal is, a rhino. But so having given up on the ideal situation, I thought that I'd still try to pursue recording this animal. So whenever I planned for visiting a zoo or going abroad to visit zoos, I would just filter by African crane and look to see if there would be anything in a given area that had one. And during a trip to Germany, if I remember correctly, no, it was Czech Republic. That's too much traveling. But during a trip to Czech Republic, we went to a zoo that had two. And it was a closed day, and it was a zoo that sort of had mostly private visitors. So very ideal conditions. However, the animals really didn't seem to want to vocalize. I tried a couple of times to play a trigger for them with my phone behind my back as I was going by. But again, it's almost as if they didn't really see like a connected body that could go with a phone. So they didn't seem to be too interested. And just for the sake of trying something, I thought, what if I just kind of prop my recorder here on a stand, I put the microphones on a stand and the recorder behind it. And then maybe I just kind of put a little jacket or something on my recorder to create a shape, something that, I don't know, could be interesting to look at. And then underneath that jacket, I put a speaker, and then from there I tried to play the call from pretty much that position. So I was about 100 meters away, or like, I don't know, 50, 100 meters away, however much I could do with a Bluetooth speaker. and I started playing the call that way. And they started to do the mating dance that they generally do before making the call. And I thought, okay, maybe here we go. And yeah, it worked out. And it was one of those situations where not only it feels satisfying because you cracked it once and it worked once and you got a couple of vocalizations, but I literally could do this every 10 to 20 minutes just to give them a bit of a break. And every 10 to 20 minutes, the reaction was literally the same. And on top of that, because this shape was just behind the microphones, any time that they performed this dance and that they made the sound, they were facing straight the mic. Perfect. So I literally have I have all of the GoPro footage of them performing the dance with the eyes pointing perpendicularly at the camera, because that's kind amazing. Of where everything was. So that was probably like the second or third attempt of, getting to a place that had an African crane, but actually managing to record it for once. Had a lot of time to invest in that day to make it happen. I think it was like maybe, I say a lot of time. I think it was like 3 hours. So maybe in the scope of things for people that go in the wild and try to record animals, that's not really like a long time. But since I started, I think like now that I'm a dad and I try to measure the time that I spend doing this type of thing in a more sensible way to have a good work-life balance relationship, then a good work-life balance, then I've been trying to, go for more predictable results, or just kind of call my losses a little bit earlier. So if it didn't happen I think I would have given it another half hour and then I would have called it, because you can only get so fixated.
And when you're out recording, did you have a situation where you recorded something totally unexpected, where you didn't expect a sound to come out, or where a sound sounded different, or an animal sounded different than you thought?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess yes, but not necessarily in a great way. Okay. I went to Belgium because I had a contact that mentioned they might be able to help me record an elephant. And this happened at Paradise, and I don't know if you've ever seen this place, but it is insane. It's I have to think it's the biggest, if not top 3 animal park in Europe. It looks dystopian. It just really looks weird because it's in a place where I don't think there's anything else around it. And it's pretty much a city, or I would say a city in terms of size. It's really like you're not going to be able to visit it all in one day. So anyway, I went there to record an elephant amongst other animals, but the elephant was sort of like a scheduled activity with the keepers for that day. And when I made it there, it turned out pretty tricky, because I guess we all know the elephant sound that we like, right? Which is kind of like loud trumpeting and, kind of makes you think of Jurassic Park. But in this scenario, I didn't even realize that this would be an option. But when I got there, the trainer showed me, okay, so this elephant is trained to make this sound on command. And then he tells the elephant, okay, speak. And then the elephant kind of makes this... But it's like a fairly weak...
like a mouse squeak?
Pretty much, like a glorified mouse squeak. Yeah. And, for as much as that was interesting in its own way, because I've never heard that before, it definitely wasn't exactly what I came there to record. And after about 2, the person looked at me and went, "You got it?" It was kind of like, can we at least, like, since this is already like in the back of my mind, I'm already like crippled by how underwhelming this was. So I thought like, okay, well, at least let's get quite a lot of them because it is a unique sound. So
Yeah.
might as well. And then upon editing it, you can kind of make it feel a little bit bigger, and you can really underline the uniqueness of the sound in the editing cleanup process. So I think all in all, it turned out to be a pretty cool sound. But I think when you get to a location, the expectations are always what get to you. So this was kind of one of those scenarios where I expected something and I got something else, and it wasn't exactly what I was hoping it would be. And I would think like the anti-story to this for me is when I recorded a mantled Gereza in Sweden. This is a old world monkey, and it almost looks like a lemur in terms of like color, but not the face or anything. The size is slightly larger. I guess you can Google this, black and white Gereza. And the keeper there at the zoo, I went there to record animals just sort of at random because I was new to Sweden, where I now live. The keeper told me, oh yeah, if we go to this enclosure, I believe we can get a chance of recording this animal. And the Gereza was about like 5 meters away from me when I saw the keeper coming and him pointing at me in a way of like trying to tell me, okay, start to record now because I'm about to do what I think will make the monkey go. And so I'm expecting anything in between a baboon, a gibbon, or like a capuchin monkey. But no, the mantled Gereza starts vocalizing and it makes this like frog-like kind of burpy sound. And it's kind of like,
Okay.
like that. But even though I was 5 meters away, it was very projected. And so then eventually I was able to walk pretty close to it. I think it must have been like 1 or 2 meters. But the sound itself was just, it blew my mind. I thought, okay, if I tried to record this, I don't know, however many more times, I don't think I'd ever be able to get this because I've never heard this sound before in my life. And I think that I've seen this specific type of monkey a number of times. So yeah, it was like a very, very unique kind of sound. And I remember like a few months ago, someone asking me via email, hey, do you know what this seemingly super designed sound could be made from? And they sent me the file, and it's pretty much a raw recording of a mantled Gereza. And that's how weird it is. It's, in sound design, you have a lot of animals that you're like, oh, this is like, it's a weird sound. But to anyone that is a sound designer, now we all know what it sounds like. Maybe like kookaburras could be a good example of, if you're not Australian and you watch a movie, you might hear them and go, oh, I have no idea what that is, right? And unless you've been to a zoo and have heard one. But then there are animals like these that are kind of the gems that I'm still aiming to record, where you hear the sound and go, wow, this is just nothing, like nothing else. And yeah, that was one of those scenarios where I think the appearance of the animal and the expectations that I had were kind of like, pushing me in one way, and then the sound itself surprised me in a very positive way.
Awesome. Yeah, and then maybe just looking back, as you've been recording for sound libraries now for over 10 years, I think, how has your approach to recording evolved? I mean, for sure, the expectation management is something that we all learn pretty early on, not to be too disappointed when something doesn't turn out to be the one we wanted, or even like if a whole day is just nothing, because that's the nature of the game. But maybe you have some other insights on looking back, what changed, what you did differently now.
Yeah, there have been quite a few changes between the various libraries, and I wouldn't necessarily say that this is an evolution or anything like that. It's more each library came to be because of certain curiosities or, certain things that I had in mind. So, for example, with Volume 2, I started experimenting with a 384 kilohertz recording with the Avisoft CMPA microphones, and I've used them on alligators, which weirdly do have that kind of frequency range for their guttural calls, which is strange to me, but yeah, they do. And, of course, birds and other animals where this kind of range would make more sense intuitively. And it was good. It was fun to try out, but looking into the beginning of Volume 3, I remember myself going around. I was still visiting Dundee from time to time because my now wife was still there, right? And there was a zoo there as well. And I remember this large gibbon vocalizing in the small zoo, and me always being the opposite side of the zoo, running back to the gibbon. And now you have this extra tablet that can record up to 384, but you also still rock the mix pre. You have everything going into one blimp, and then you have to kind of synchronize the recording, everything into an Orca bag that is like probably at this point 10 kilos, kind of weight to carry around. And I'm running around like I'm running for my life when I hear the gibbon. So the clunking, just everything started to feel way too cumbersome. So weirdly enough, with Volume 2, I was kind of like trying to go, okay, how high can we go? And I saw that it was sort of marginal gains, because even size after a while disappears, given that speed also slows down. Like if you record a lion and slow it down to like a quarter speed, it sounds like a motorboat. But if you go any further, you start to really get a drone more than an actual sound that you think, okay, like, and sure, you could have different ways of pitching that retain the time and whatnot. But I think, in short, I felt like it was a situation where I was missing on a lot of recordings on the location because I wanted a 15 kilos kit to come with me to get these recordings. And so you think, what is it better to finish a recording day at a zoo where you've recorded 10 animals in a way that is just impossible to top? It's just going to be like insane, like 100%, like there's nothing missing, etc. Or you get home with 30 animals instead, recorded at like 98% quality from what you can perceive, because all of the difference that we're talking about here is ultrasonic. So I haven't dropped to the CMPA, I'm still using it, but it's now connected directly into the mix pre. And I'm still using the Sanken, of course, and my 8050 for center image. But for example, now, speaking of evolution, I've tried to occasionally swap the 8040s that I would normally use in sort of like an XY fashion with micro Uzis, again, because those were the only two last microphones that were sitting outside of the blimp, which then required the baby ball system from Rycode. And at that point you have like quite a lot of stuff dangling around, and the stereo bar that comes with them, or that I'm using in conjunction with them, sometimes would just kind of like come loose. It's just hard to also put the blimp away in a moment where you're not recording, and overall, like, you just feel like you're doing a very weird ultra intense workout just for your wrist when doing a recording day like that. So moving to something a little bit lighter has been what I've tried to pursue in the last year or so, I would say. And I've also tried to come up with some solutions for drop rigs because of, situations like the Rhinos and whatnot, where I love my D100, but, has its limits, and it is one microphone, or, it's a stereo mic, but it is one kind of perspective. And I do love, or maybe have come to be very reliant on having at least 3 or 4 mics where I know the strength of each microphone, and I can say, oh, the low end, I'm grabbing from this always, almost all the time. but of course stereo image I need from these two, and then like which one is my center and whatnot. Like I can think about the sound a lot more if I have a good chunk of them. So I've been working on a kit that is more portable for drop rigs, which fits all inside of one blimp with an F3 and a battery, so you can pretty much close it. It's self-contained and kind of zookeeper friendly, so you can handle it to a zookeeper and say, if you point it roughly in the right direction, this is already recording, and I can stop and restart the recording via my phone, so we should be good. And then you can kind of even, go away from that area, come back a few hours later and reconnect the phone, check that everything is still rolling, and then, not think about it while in the meantime you're going through the zoo trying to record animals that don't mind human presence as much. So that's what the evolution has been in the kit. It's been very based on the animal experience and kind of, I guess, going through zoos in a physical sense, as in going from point A to point B and trying to understand how to do it in a way that is not so, cumbersome. Yeah.
I can totally relate to that. I'm gonna next year, hopefully, I'm gonna build some drop rigs as well, because right now my drop rig is not a drop rig. It's more like setting up a tripod and then walking away in the forest, which also works, of course, for like bird and ambience and stuff. But I want to do stuff where I can leave it like 24 hours somewhere, or even in the rain or whatever. So and that making it as compact and as easy to use as possible. Just like you said, it's already recording. Just leave it there and just check. That's perfect. And while we're on the topic of gear and on everything, maybe you have some lessons you wish you had learned earlier for people that are just starting out. What is like the first thing that come to mind when you think about what did you wish you had learned earlier, except for, of course, embracing failure?
That's a really good question. I mean, there are things that I'm sure that I still have yet to learn about, like data management and how much, for example, I'm keeping out of my recording sessions, where I should probably like be able to live with one hard drive and instead I have 25. So things like those, but they're kind of like secondary to me in a way, as in I say this, but I know that it's a problem for others and they have solved it because that's how much they care about solving that problem. Whereas for me, I'm generally kind of, thinking more along the lines of a lot of animal reactions happen as you enter a room or whatever. And so I'm generally always rolling because I never know when a reaction will happen if I'm working with this type of content. But I'm really trying to think about a better answer for this, because I'm really I'm confident that when it comes to gear, there's also something there that I have. I guess perhaps the most important thing, and it kind of reconnects to things that I mentioned recently about trying to go to 384 and whatnot, is that there is definitely a good enough, after which you should really think about when we talk about diminishing returns, where is the diminishing factor? Because sometimes you think, okay, well, sure, working at 384 might be a little bit slower, for example, just in terms of processing and RX and whatnot. And it might be a little bit more data intensive when it comes to storage. But weirdly enough, for me, it wasn't so much that was a problem, but carrying the recording equipment and having to monitor two different things at the same time, and then having to adjust for clock drift in post. It becomes pretty mental to kind of, add all of these things together and still try to make something. Like, I don't think I've ever had as much of a feeling as for how limited our time on Earth is since I've been a dad, because now, I have more limited time to kind of spend on this type of thing, and I can actually feel myself slightly getting older as the years go by. So it's weird, but like when you're editing 7 microphones instead of 5, and 5 is already like a gun range worthy kind of endeavor for recording animals, then it's I think there is a point where you can tell yourself, okay, this is good enough. What is even the purpose of having more, right? So I think that might be one of the things that, thinking back to them, is the takeaway, the fact that if you go in autopilot for something that is multi-volume, such as this collection for me, it's super important to come back to, but why, and, try to understand not so much what people want out of the library necessarily, but also what you want, and, why, whatever the worst day in the field was, what was it due to? Was it due to the fact that I was not able to get somewhere in time? Was it due to the fact that a piece of gear betrayed me and whatnot? And, I think that kind of reflection helps you understand how to move things forward in a way that is actually organic and non-forced. Because you can think to yourself, but wouldn't it be cool to have the first animal library ever to release at 384 kilohertz? And, that was the motivating factor for studying that, alongside wanting to know how much more there was past 192. Yeah, I guess the limiting thing after a while can really get to you. So
yeah,
I'm not sure if I've said that the first animal library recorded at 384 or the first at 192. I don't know if I should go for an alt take on that.
I think you said 384 on the second, right?
Yes, maybe.
Yeah, when we were talking about that before, because but that's
definitely
before. That's a
before.
good point.
I was not sure about now.
I wanted to ask, like, with something like 384, how big are the files when you record? Because that must have been like massive amounts of data, right?
I guess not quite twice as much, because you're limited from the standpoint of you're recording at 24-bit instead of 32.
Okay, yeah, sure.
And you're recording two mics. I had two CMPAs in kind of stereo image for that. So you're not recording, the 5 mics that you already had at 384. So you're still recording, I think, 4 mics at 192 via the mix pre, and then you're recording the extra 2. So it is a good chunk of extra data, but it's not brutal. It's still audio, so it's manageable considering like how much a GoPro can, take over if you use particular settings. So yeah, it's not terrible. It wasn't, like I mentioned, it wasn't exactly the driving factor. It's a bit of a headache, but you can work with that. But all in all, consider the other things were what kind of made me pivot towards a more portable kind of set.
And I guess the more interesting thing is then having lots of microphones, because, like, as you said, recording with 7 microphones for an hour means basically 7 hours of material. Of course, you sometimes edit stuff together, but sometimes you also have to like isolate stuff, and it gets really complicated editing all that stuff. I had that realization myself that maybe 3 microphones is enough for something simple, because I also, in the beginning, I took everything I had. I was like, every microphone, let's just see what happens, what brings the best result. But after a while, you like really start to shave down on microphones, to really focus on more specific things, and then just learn to live with it. I mean, there's always going to be a better way of recording something, but you did what you did, and then
Yeah, exactly. I think about it this way. If I had like 100 microphones, already now when I use 5, I tend to mute or high pass the audible domain of, maybe the Sanken or whatnot. And realistically, if one really needed to push it, you could say, well, grab the 8050 and like maybe create an artificial stereo image if you really want to, because it doesn't need to be super wide. Add something that is ultrasonic, which doesn't necessarily need to be the Sanken, but let's say that it is. And then you could technically roll with these 2 microphones and, see what you get. However, having a stereo image means that sometimes if an animal, for example, if you're recording in a herd or whatever, like there's more than one animal, and the one that you're pointing at is not the one that ends up vocalizing. If you have the 8040s for sides, then you're a lot more the chance of swapping the center for the left or the right is a lot easier, right? So you can do things like those. So ultimately, it's just the chance for something extra. So if you had 100 mics, it could be that, one for some reason works super well with a given animal, or an animal goes almost subsonic and whatnot, and that mic has the extension, or a microphone can go up to 384, and that mic has the extension, and maybe you're recording at that sample rate. But yeah, sorry, I mean, of course you'd have like 192 as limit, because I was just trying to make it simple. But I think like the options are what you want, and when you know how much is enough, then that's where you can kind of master the kit you have. And yeah, I think keeping it the same also allows you to get faster at working with it.
And maybe like after you've done everything and you released your library, and maybe also other libraries that you've used, what in your opinion makes a great sound library, both from a technical but also from a creative standpoint?
I would say that the creative aspect for me would be, of course, the most important, and it would have to do with what is being added to whatever is already out there. So it's a question that I ask myself a lot whenever I make something new, because there's already so much content out there that if something new comes out, I would hope that, since this is a creative endeavor, we would be asking ourselves, why more, right? It's not like we need to just fill the hard drives and and that's our only purpose. So of course, if something comes out and it's something that has never been recorded before, or it features like elements that are like a very specific style, maybe it's something that you've recorded like a billion times, but now there's a new mic or whatever else, like a new technique for recording, who knows, but like the whole perspective of it is unique, then that would also make it worthwhile for me in terms of this is worth having. The technical aspect for me is pretty simple. I just love things to be kind of broadband and kind of have the fullness in the spectrum. So it's the kind of quality bar needs to be cleared for me to be happy with something. But at the same time, there are also new libraries that are coming out with old school styles that weirdly enough also make the cut for me, because it's as if someone went back in time and said, okay, it's like I was hired today to work for Hanna-Barbera kind of a project and whatnot, and now this library exists, and it's not post-produced to sound old. It literally is collected, and the prop selection and whatnot is the right one, and it fits with the theme and whatnot. It's almost the same reasons for which I would like any piece of media. Like if I think of myself liking a movie, it will be because of either the cinematography and the style of it over the message, or it will be because of the message, even if the recording was not something that necessarily, or the editing or the visual aspect is something that sticks with me. It's like liking Dune versus Adolescence for me kind of thing. It's like one has a big chunk of eye candy, and another one has like a super strong message that is delivered so smoothly you don't even realize that the medium is so flawless.
I see what you mean.
Some two weird examples to put together in a
great,
sentence, but I hope it makes sense.
It caught me off guard, but it makes a lot of sense.
Me off guard
I enjoyed both as well. Yeah, and when you're then using your sounds or other sounds, doesn't matter. Like, how do you approach designing sounds from the raw material you have? Do you have something where it's like open-minded? Okay, I'm just gonna try, or do you specifically choose sounds that you think might fit and then try to get them to fit your purpose?
Yeah, I guess it depends on which phase I'm in with regards to the designing process. You have the moments where you need to break the mold of something new and you're just striving not to make something that has been done already before. And in those situations, I think I'll try to I'll think of all of the things that generally would be my go-to for building a safe kind of, ingredient for the sound. And then I'll try to take a step to the left or to the right and see, okay, let's say that I'm trying to work on this gun and maybe I want something thumpy, and I would probably try to grab, like, I don't know, even kicks or punches from libraries. What is kind of that, but not quite that? This is a bit of a rough example, but yeah, I'll try to take a number of like side steps that way. Or I'll just give myself a limitation, like in previous game studios that I worked for, we would have like sound design Fridays and whatnot, where you give yourself a very tight kind of guideline for creating sound. For example, you can cover 5 seconds of footage, but you can only use 10 sounds, and they are not even picked by you.
Nice.
Doing that sometimes can really squeeze the juice out of content in a way that you wouldn't foresee. And then all of a sudden you're thinking about, I don't know, like a milk frother in an entirely different way or whatever, because you know that you can bend it to that extent,
Yeah.
Of course, if you kind of manage to stay away from the trope of, putting so many plugins on something that you're kind of nodding to yourself thinking this sounds awesome, and you're like, try adding it, like, replace the content entirely at source. Nothing changes because it's like just what you're listening to is flanger or whatnot. No, not so much that, but yeah, I think if the creative if this is like the creative side of the gig where you really need to come up with something new, that's what I try to do. I try to work by association, but in a pseudo random kind of way, because I know that if I take my known pathways, I'll just end up with the result that I had in mind all along, which will be the safe result that you can kind of, sometimes you can even start with that, kind of do a save session and say, okay, we got it. Like, if we are in the creative process, but we also need this tomorrow, then I'll do this in 5 days, but in the first day, I'll make the safe version. I'll implement it, and I'll get the logic to kind of, work in game and whatnot. And I can already kind of get a feel for how often does it play, how does it feel, does it feel worldized enough, etc. And then from there on, you can kind of take another 2 directions. So that's one of the things that I love to do as well. If I'm in that stage, is I do the thing 3 times, and I try to do it with something in mind. Like, if we are talking about a gun or whatnot, how does it feel for it to be slightly more abstract? How does it feel for it to be slightly more mechanical? How does it feel for it to be slightly more makeshift or whatnot? And, without necessarily going into full-on science fiction or cyberpunk domains, just how can you shift something slightly in a way that is kind of almost perceivable, but not quite. And it is a restart from scratch every time. I'm not saying that I'm shifting it that little. I'm just saying at the end of the day, if, based on the project and whatnot, I might not necessarily want to full on go for sci-fi or cyberpunk or whatnot. So yeah, that's how I go about it when it's something really, really creative. And of course, day to day, since it's the game industry, sometimes you really have to go for not exactly mass production of sounds, but if you're talking about building a set of explosions that is larger or smaller than one that already exists, then you already have those guidelines that have been kind of explored, and they are the result of creative endeavors. So you just have to do a smaller version of that, and that's a little bit more of a self-contained task, of course. So any degree in between, these 2 things can be part of my day-to-day. But of course, the one that I love the most and also I'm more afraid of is the first one, where you kind of have to come up with something new, have to justify why you did it, and to yourself, before I'm even talking about justifying a recording trip to production and whatnot. I'm really talking about why does this even need to be different, which hopefully is a question that everybody in the team is asking themselves, because then that whatever is the end product will be different because everybody thought about why it needed to be that way.
Yeah,
And not
Yeah, you
every
definitely need
aspect
to
of a
have a
game
reason,
needs
yeah.
to be like that, as in not everything that we do in all shapes and forms needs to be different, but you know.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, yeah, you just need to have a real reason not to make it just different because of difference. I have this approach also, especially when I work on like short films, that I just throw stuff in just so I have things in there. Just like you said, like make something very quick, so just so it works. And oftentimes I even do it very roughly. Sometimes I even do mouth noises when I don't find a sample in like 20 seconds,
Yeah.
just so I have everything in and I know how it's spaced out, where maybe the music needs to be taken over, or yeah. And then sometimes these things stay in because it's just a small sound that doesn't have any effect, and it doesn't have to be something special. It's just there, so yeah, you see something and you need to hear it because otherwise it would be weird. And sometimes there's just like a quickly 10-second recorded mouth noise in there that just gets slight processing, and then that's it. That's all right. And everything doesn't have to be this overproduced kind of thing. It just it just needs to fit. And sometimes my voice fits very well. I don't know why. It's just
It's a practice.
It just works.
Maybe imitating bats has morphed you into someone that can really kind of take the voice pretty far.
Yeah, I like to play around with that. Maybe I'll explore that a bit more in the future. But I'm always surprised at what comes out sometimes. Then speaking about those tasks, I don't know how you think about that, but there's sometimes things where you're just stuck on something, and I'd like to ask you if you can remember like one of the most challenging tasks you had, where you just really threw your head against the wall, and then what you did, or what the resolution was, because I think it's also always good for beginners or for people in the industry that just started out that are sometimes struggling. For me, at least, every time I heard that, I was like, oh, this guy that already won an Oscar is still struggling. That means I'm doing the right thing. I'm feeling what I'm feeling. It's all right. So yeah, that's why I asked this question. So if you can think about any task where you really struggled with it, and what was it, that would be nice.
Yes, one thing that comes to mind was about 5 years ago in a new project with a new team. I was tasked with working on an effect that should make the player feel as if their senses had been expanded, let's say. And that was one of the tasks that felt the hardest for me to work on, because I tend to be quite literal, or at least my background before then was with quite literal sound design. I never worked with anything that was in the kind of fantasy domain. And although I had played with the sounds that, in isolation felt kind of abstract and whatnot, never really needed to go into that domain. So it was a little bit tricky also because the sound needed to feel somewhat hyperrealistic, somewhat fantasy, but also somehow still kind of grounded. And that there was a lot of experimentation there, from just using synths and feeling like this was just not something that was being perceived by the character in the game, to going too literal and feeling like that sound just didn't represent an expansion of senses in that way. And so the end result was pretty much a collage of 3 different approaches that I had, meaning, I did exactly what I was talking about earlier. I tried to do this 3 times so that I knew that if I had made 3 very different mistakes, at least the audio director could still look at them in the map and go, if you've generated a triangle, then maybe you're kind of leaning towards center left or whatever. Like, you could still find a place. Maybe there is a scenario where, the answer is it's just not here, like go elsewhere. But you ideally cast the net wide enough that hopefully the thing you want is in that domain, and you can say a little bit of this, maybe this element from that. And one of the things that I played with for this expansion of senses was to have a dummy head with microphones built in, and just kind of literally closing its ears and then opening them slowly with my hands, kind of rubbing against the ear flaps as I remove them from the fake head. And that kind of gave it a sense of like opening because of how used we are to, this happening to us. And it's kind of funny because you're just recording the hand going over the ears and then leaving them, but you're not really high passing or low passing anything, right? It's just like the sensation. And so I think that was the main ingredient that ultimately allowed me to crack that piece of design. But weirdly enough, it was kind of grounded and it had to do with recording. So I'm 100% confident that any other sound designer would have probably cracked it in a different way. But because I come from this kind of, very grounded type of approach, and I guess to an extent the game demanded for it, then that's where I ended up with. And there are elements that are definitely not grounded in the design, the final design, but ultimately that is kind of like the thing that I feel like if I remove it, then that sound doesn't work anymore for me. And I'm not really sure if the director thought the same, but I think I recall getting approval for that specific aspect, and kind of it feeling like it gave the message, it sent the message across, which was hard enough.
Yeah, but it sounds really good. Like when you mentioned it, I was like, oh yeah, that's amazing. But it's just like when you just go out of the swimming pool and suddenly your ears pop and you hear everything or something like that. I was also thinking about that. That thing that everyone basically knows. Just like you said, like covering your ears and uncovering them is something that we have done countless times over our lives. So using that as a vehicle to transport this widening of the senses is great. And I'm also very fond of using recordings and using very literal things that we can relate to and mixing it in. And I think it's a well-established thing in the audio world, right? We use dangerous animal sounds to mix it under spaceships since Star Wars, and there's many of these things that you can use. I don't know if it's a slamming of a door or some of the most just daily sounds that you hear every day can be used to great effect, because everyone knows a specific sound, like a doorbell ringing or something else, or like, I don't know, tea boiling or water boiling. And when you use that to mix in, you can always create some kind of connection from the listener, especially in fantasy sounds.
And honestly, like that makes me think about another scenario where I was really struggling to nail this sound for like something that felt pretty abstract in a title that was kind of like again, fantasy, kind of science fiction and whatnot. And we had a stakeholder there kind of reviewing the content, and after about a week of work, I have used all these synths and I've gone pretty crazy with it. And there was very little grounded content in that one design. And the feedback was, okay, that's cool, but it really doesn't feel like it's coming out of this, physical object, which is made of metal. And then all of a sudden, just adding like a very small sweetener that only played when you were like 50 meters or less away from the object, making it sound, that fixed the entire issue. And it was kind of funky because that's all that the person that wanted the sound to be more grounded really asked for. But in my head, it could have been no, this is like an entire redesign. They were not asking for this to become a sound that was so realistic, that was only composed with realistic sounds and felt like it could be part of the world, but they were asking to just ground the sound in something, because you go from having a sound so abstract that you're like, okay, this is just a synthesizer, like I can literally feel the synthesizer, but you're not even putting it in the game, like as in it's implemented, it plays in 3D, but it really doesn't relate to anything that is around it. Sometimes maybe you can, make that fly. But I think sometimes you just need enough to kind of justify all the weirdness that you've made around the sound. And if there is something that grounds it, then all of a sudden you're kind of, excused for all of the weirdness.
Yeah, and before we slowly come to the end, because we're almost we are almost over an hour talking now, which is great because it's so much fun. But I cannot forget the one question I always ask every one of my guests, and that is, what is the first sound you ever recorded, and why did you record it?
Oh boy, I I assume it must have been when I was a kid, and my dad had this pretty big hi-fi system in our living room, and myself and my best friend, we were kind of like, I don't know how old I was. I can barely remember this, to be honest. But we had a microphone and we invented a language because, like I didn't even know English at the time. So we wanted something that sounded like English. And we were just like singing into the microphone, just trying to record music without anything, like, no instruments whatsoever. You were just kind of like screaming into the microphone, just having fun. And the weirdest thing about it is that I still remember like the letters, like I still remember the words that don't exist, which we kind of were thinking about. And I don't remember them because we actually recorded it. As in, I think we tried to record this stuff, and we probably succeeded at some point. I don't know. I never listened back to it, but I have this very clear image of trying to do it. And yeah, just kind of, kids being kids, I guess. But first time actually that someone asks me the question, and I didn't realize that it would go back that far. I thought that it would be more kind of, after the sound design school in Vancouver, or like, related to music in a more kind of mature sense. But this was like,
That's a good throwback, yeah. That's the purpose of the question. It always throws a curveball, and people just remember some weird thing from their past. And but that's very cute, like inventing a whole language. That is fun.
In lack of English education.
Yeah, I mean, it's creativity. It's pure creativity, right? As kids, that's how you do it. So the only other thing to ask is, like, do you have any upcoming projects or things you want to promote, shout out? Of course, the new animal library, it's been out for a while now, but still, it's amazing. Check it out if you haven't yet. They are all just very, very unique libraries. I really, really like them. Anything else you want to shout out?
Yes. Well, I guess, I mentioned that I'm a dad, and we're about to have a baby again. And that, alongside the fact that the libraries are doing pretty decent for themselves, means that I was able to have a first person come in and help me for a pretty long time next year. And his name is Vasin, and he's gonna join the team, so to speak. And probably we're gonna still focus on animals for the foreseeable future, because I have so many spare parts and recording sessions that took place after Volume 4 that I kind of wanted to master. But I really don't know what next year is going to look like, because I don't know what the velocity of 2 people on this little endeavor looks like. So it may be that we'll need to come up with ideas that we have yet to have, and I'm just really excited about someone joining me in this way. So shout out to Vasin then.
Awesome. That sounds very, very interesting. Yeah. And congrats on becoming a second dad, basically.
Thank you. Awesome. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully all good.
Yeah. I mean, I can just speak from experience. I also have a daughter. She's 6 now, and I've taken her with me on recording trips, like just little ones, just to teach her stuff. And she's very, very eager to do it herself. And so you can basically train your own employees very easily with kids.
Yes. My first daughter is also already in training process.
Perfect.
Yeah. Last time that we went to record the hippos, a hippo made a sound, and she was completely quiet during the performance. And I turned to her and I was like, "Oh yes!" It's actually in the Greg documentary that you mentioned.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. They can be very quiet, yeah. Mine as well. She can just be concentrating and just sitting there, don't making a sound. Perfect. Not ruining any recording. Okay, so again, thank you for your time. It was a really, really pleasant talk. And wish you all the best for the next 10 years of sound libraries.
Thank you. Thank you, and to you.
Oh, you're awesome! Yes! Boom!
got that on camera too. Yeah, that was one of the better takes.
Our tenacity was rewarded and we finally got lucky. After a successful start to the day, we were feeling great and immediately went on the hunt for the next opportunity.
Looking for more audio-related podcasts to listen to? We're part of the Audio Podcast Alliance, featuring a hand-picked selection of the very best podcasts about sound. Be sure to hear the latest episodes from our friends in the community at audiopodcast.org. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting on patreon.com/fieldandfoley or ko-fi.com/fieldandfoley, where you gain early access to episodes in lossless format and can submit questions for our guests. Thank you for listening.